All right, we are back, and we want to welcome you into the FAU football before the rewind. Very catchy name, but the reason that myself, Kris Bartels, Mike Mareshko are hanging out tonight is that we are going to give you our insights on the 2019 Cheribundi Boca Raton Bowl, FAU SMU, because FAU Football Rewind will debut on Saturday afternoon. The top 10 FAU wins from the last 3 years, the modern championship era, as we'll call it. And the first game re-aired in its entirety. The FAU radio broadcast comes at noon on Saturday. Fox Sports 640, FAU and SMU in that Cheribundi Boca Raton Bowl. So want to welcome everybody in. I'm Ken Levica, the voice of FAU. I'm in Tamarack, Florida. And my broadcast partner, Kris Bartels. I'll let you take it, buddy.
Hey, I'm Kris Bartels, former player, now sidekick to the voice. Some people refer to me as Whisper. Glad to be here from Tampa.
Mikey?
Ken, Kris, good to see you guys as always. Mike Marechko, the engineer during the games, while these guys are bringing you all the action, pregame, halftime, postgame host as well, and also the guy who has the task of making sure that all of Ken's credentials and paperwork gets to the stadium with him. Otherwise, we'd have big problems if the voice was stuck outside because he couldn't find his lanyard. But it is always good to see you guys. I'm excited that FAU and our broadcast team at Fox Sports 640 is going to be looking back over the highlights really of the Lane Kiffin era. And I'm excited that just this week, Willie Taggart got his first victory at FAU officially with the Swab Show over Coach Mack, Coach Joyce, Coach Dusty May as part of a great program put together online by the FAU MBA Sport Management Program with Dr. Reardon and his team. So hopefully we've got many more victories to look forward to Coach Taggart in 2020. But now we look back with the last game we played in 2019 for sure.
Yeah, that was really well done by everybody at FAU. And, of course, we thank Howie Schwab and congratulations to Willie Taggart, who was showing an incredible amount of emotion. There were, like, fist pumps and, like, yells, and he was into the whole thing.
So the victory dance at the end. I hope we see that on the sideline when the Gatorade showers come around.
No, that was a lot of fun. That was a whole lot of fun. We also want to say congratulations to all of the FAU players who were signed after the NFL draft. Of course, Harrison Bryant going in the fourth round of the Cleveland Browns. Rashad Smith is headed to the Bears. You have James Pierre going to the Steelers, and then Brandon Walton is off to the Bills to block for Devin Singletary. So that's to me one of the cooler stories of the draft period is that reunification between those two. But congratulations to all those guys. And Bartels, I saw you sent a tweet about your NFL draft experience in 2008. In April of 2008, May of 2008, I suppose, at that time, where you said you went to some CFL tryouts and wasted some money and then never got a call.
I blew so much money on CFL tryouts. It's ridiculous. There's like, I probably
like how much?
I was if I had to put some money on it, I probably would say in the ballpark of $3,000 for paying for tryouts, like just like shady workouts too. Not even like in the actual facility, like in the back of some sort of like Optimus Park where two guys are there and one is on like a Winnipeg shirt, and I'm like, I mean, I'm here. Let me just run a 40. And
I'm telling you, the Bombers are sketchy. The Bombers are sketchy.
Super sketchy. Yeah, no, like my draft day, nothing compared to what some of these guys have. But I can imagine, the anticipation of waiting for your name to be called. I think Harrison, his name should have been called a lot sooner. My personal opinion, obviously, I guess people know him better than I do. But the tape doesn't lie. That's what bothers me. The tape doesn't lie.
Yeah.
They always, he got knocked because he is undersized compared to a lot of NFL tight ends. But, when you go to the Underwear Olympics at the Combine in Indianapolis or anything else that these front office general managers and scouts are looking at, they measure hand size. They measure how many reps you can put up. They don't measure heart, effort. And I always think that there's many more guys that turn out to be bust in the NFL because they were overvalued for their metrics as opposed to the guys who put out great tape from Saturdays might not have had the measurables that are there for draft weekend, and you come back and say, wow, where did they get this guy from? I think Harrison Bryant could really be one of those guys. Nice finds, pick 115, and I love the fact that have we ever had two former Owls playing together on the same NFL roster at the same time, the way Brandon Walton and Motor Singletary are for now?
Well, you've also got in Cleveland now, you've got Harrison and you've got Brandon Bryant. So
question and answer right there.
Yeah. So there you go. There you go. And Cleveland's had, you had Greg Joseph and Tavon Coley that were there as well. And so, yeah, it's happened before.
And they also played together at FAU, like not just FAU alums, but they played together at the same time at FAU.
Yeah,
playing together at the same time on the NFL roster.
Yeah. So,
awesome.
See, you learn something, and maybe some people watching learn something right now. That's why we're here for you, is to teach you and to guide you through this. Also, I want to make sure before I forget, Mark Knoll, it's all time, is about to close up shop there in Boca Raton, and I know that all three of us are really tight with Mark, and we love the store and the support that not only he gave us, but we loved supporting him, and we were clothed by him every FAU football season. So it's truly, I think, safe to say this is the end of an era. Mark has been more important to FAU than I think even he knows.
Yeah, I don't think he understands the magnitude of what he's meant to a lot of, not just fans, but former players, opening up his doors for some kid off the street who just so happens to be, third or fourth on the depth chart, and invites him into the store to sign it. All these kids have a special part of that store. Mark has a big part of that university. It's going to be a huge gap that no one's going to be able to fill. The tradition that comes with it is going to be up to, the fans, the voices, the people who know Mark himself, without it's Owl time, to still be there and try to lift him up and kind of just show what he's meant to the university.
Without a doubt. I mean, I hope they can figure out a way to take that wall from its out time and maybe put it in the Schmidt complex or put it in FAU Stadium, kind of keep that tradition going. But, I mean, for us right now to be talking to each other on Zoom instead of gathering in a local watering hole of small potatoes, unfortunately, what you're seeing with Mark and a lot of businesses around Florida and the country being true victims of this virus and this pandemic and the decisions that were made. So you can at least help him go out with a bang by still ordering online, as a lot of people are doing. Get your items while you can. And certainly our thanks to Mark, and we hope that he stays involved and close with the FAU football program, because his support for the players, like you guys mentioned, and the fans over the year has been tremendous on game days and all year long.
So we're going to miss Mark. He's still going to be around. Definitely going to miss the store, but Mark will definitely be around. And I have a feeling once things get back to normal, there will be beers on the horizon between all of us, and hopefully doing it in person. We'll try and get him here on one of these Zoom calls just to talk about his stories, because I love the pictures of him in the final, Rusty Smith's final home game, him doing the coin toss at Lockhart and all that stuff. So he's got stories for days, and that's the whole thing that we're trying to do here. So again, FAU Football Rewind, Saturdays at noon from this Saturday through July 4th. And these are going to be replays in their entirety of the FAU radio broadcast of some of the greatest FAU games from the last 3 years. We're talking 2019 at Western Kentucky, 2017-2019 Shula Bowl. We're talking both beatdowns of North Texas in 2017, regular season and Conference USA Championship, the win in 17 over Marshall, and the Conference USA title games, the Boca Raton Bowl wins, and we start Saturday with the 2019 Cheribundi Boca Raton Bowl. And so, boys, why don't we start right there? By the way, how bougie am I tonight with the Robert Mondavi Pinot Noir during the course of this? So it screams I'm better than you, but I don't mean it to come off like that. I just enjoy it, so I apologize for that.
I think, Mike, and I think you would agree with me, the way that Ken has been going, the path that he's been on, I wouldn't really expect anything less. I don't expect to see you with a beer or some sort of mixed beverage. That's way too many calories for your liking.
That's right. Yeah,
Well, I mean, he starts off tonight, flaunting the guns here and showing us.
Yeah.
He starts up with the beverage. Like, I'm drinking cold coffee right now, and he's
I
whipping
don't
out
even have a drink, and I feel left out. There's nothing here for me to drink, and I'm a little envious of what you have there, Ken. So,
well, we'll have to make it up next week when we do this again, then, Bartels.
Oh, yeah.
But let's tell stories. And so, December 21st, Saturday afternoon, FAU Stadium. That was the scene set for the Cheribundi Boca Raton Bowl, Florida Atlantic, and SMU. And I suppose, guys, this story starts in the aftermath of the Conference USA Championship game, where we knew that Lane Kiffin was gone. He was headed to Ole Miss. And I guess the story starts where I was at in the FAU locker room after that game. And we will have another one of these sessions that talks about the Conference USA title game. We can get into Lane's post-game speech with the team, but I think it's how Glenn Spencer was introduced to the team that starts all of this. And it was Brian White in the locker room saying, hey, we're going to go through a coaching search. We want your input, but the interim coach for the bowl game is going to be Glenn Spencer. And I'm sure it wasn't a surprise to you guys at all. And you had actually told me when I came back upstairs that you had seen Brian White and administrators talking to Glenn Spencer on the field before he went back into the tunnel and eventually into the locker room. But the reception, the roar of the players when Spencer was introduced as interim head coach, I mean, it was overwhelming. He was the favorite. He was who the players wanted. Don't forget, this was coming off of a dominant defensive effort in the Conference USA title game. This is coming in the heels of all but clinching the national lead and for turnover deficit, like just a superb year. And the reception he got was overwhelming. Like, he looked choked up initially at the reaction, like he wasn't expecting it. But I think we all sort of got the sense that he was going to be the interim head coach.
Yeah, I think from my perspective, having the opportunity earlier in the season to catch those bus rides back after a game, heading back to the airport and being on that defensive bus and seeing the way that the kids respond to him as a person, not just as a coach. It's easy to respect a coach because they're on that platform, but they respect him as a person. And it's hard for a coach to earn your trust where you can see them more as in, just a coach, as somebody I could confide in, somebody that I could trust. And I think that is exactly what Glenn Spencer did with this team, even being there for 1 year. He made the relationship more important than the X's and O's. The X's and O's are going to come, and we saw that result. But it was a relationship that he built with the kids, the trust that he built with the kids, the buy-in from the kids, from the players, that gave him that emotional response, that wanted him to be the guy once Lane's train ended up leaving Boca. But, it going into that bowl game, a lot of hype about what's next, or, SMU, are we showing up? And luckily FAU showed up and showed out.
Glenn Spencer has been instrumental and a big factor in the way the last two seasons for FAU ended up. Keep in mind the way things happened in 2018 when he was still the defensive coordinator at Charlotte and shut things down against FAU in the finale. Then he comes here and is huge all through 2019 with a lot of the same players that we thought underperformed. You then saw the development and emergence of some new stars. Like Caleb Bryce over the course of the season, or Miko Dotson on the back end, who had been hurt the year before. You saw what his potential was. And for those players, and keep in mind the other distractions in the news that we got in the hours and days leading up to the bowl game of some of the key players that were not going to be participating in the game, like Kiki Leroy. And to just keep everything together, to keep that team focused, to have them in the right mindset, the right attitude, and then to go out on national network TV and steamroll SMU. That was a great, great performance. And I was, if it weren't for FAU and Brian White hiring someone like a Willie Taggart to come in and take over, you'd understand why so many people were disappointed Glenn Spencer didn't get the interim tag taken off right away. But certainly Brian White and company went out and made what I think is going to be a tremendous hire for FAU. And Glenn Spencer, understandably, wants to move on from that. Feels like he got passed over. Things happen. But for this week or the couple of weeks we had between the conference championship game and the bowl game, what a job he did. Unbelievable.
There was no time wasted going and getting Coach Taggart, and so I think that did help in the lead up to the game. Everybody knew, hey, this was going to be the last go around. There was a finality. At least coaches, unlike with the Conference USA title game, that question had already been answered, and so they could begin their potential job searches as soon as the Boca Raton Bowl was over. And I think that was a service that was done to all of them, is that everybody knew by that point where, the situation was at. And so that was beneficial. Of course, it always sucks, but it's beneficial. There's no good way to go about that. One thing leading up into to the game. So the Boca Raton Bowl is part of the Boca Holiday Parade. And I represented FAU, and so I walked alongside like a Ford Mustang. And what happens in this spot is that the Owlsley can show up in his true form. All of the people that make up Owlsley can be there in person because it's FAU in the Boca Raton Bowl. So what happens though in SMU's case is that the school ships their mascot costume to Boca, and an intern for the Boca Raton Bowl ends up walking in that mascot costume during the course of the holiday parade. And so it was me, Owlsley, and then this poor intern in a 5,000-degree horse outfit walking alongside these automobiles in the holiday parade. And halfway through, the skies just opened up. It started pouring. And I said to myself at that point, oh my God, what an omen for what this game is potentially going to be. Like it was the night that Willie Taggart arrived, hadn't yet had his press conference, but was coming to Boca to sign the contract. And then all of a sudden it's downpouring. I'm like, man, I hope this is not a bad omen for the game. Like I was soaked, and I was like, man, that horse is going to stink. But Owlsley had like someone holding an umbrella for him. People were cheering at him and wanting him to sign autographs. Like Owlsley I've never seen a mascot as popular as Owlsley is, as he was walking through the streets of Boca. That was not that I ever did. I never thought that Owlsley was a big deal, but like that was surprising to me. That was amazing.
I think Owlsley has had a major uptick in swag in the past couple.
I know.
Like there were times where Owlsley would be in the same room as us on road trips with the mascot head in the corner. You're just like, all right, this is a really awkward situation. You know what I mean? But now, if you told me, Kevin, hey, we're not rooming, or Mikey, if you were like, hey, we're not rooming because Owlsley's on the trip, I'd be like, yeah, I'm with Owlsley.
Yeah,
that's the type of like that dude has.
I will say this. I used to have an affinity for the previous version, the short, dumpy version of Owlsley, like the chubby one. Like I liked that Owlsley. Like it was kind of cute and like but the tall, imposing Owlsley has grown on me. Like I'm into that Owlsley. That's a good Owlsley.
Plus, the wardrobe options have certainly opened up, like Bartels is saying. Like Owlsley not only walks around with swag, but they dress him up nicely for various events, right. Match whatever team uniforms are being worn that day. And when he goes around campus, we see him for the pregame show when we're down and outside. We see him at the coaches show during the week. I know Ken's a little busy then, can't take in the full crowd atmosphere because he's working that night while I'm in the back with Kevin Crossman and others having beverages during the show. But yeah, Owlsley, I think is a hit, whether you're in the parking lots, in the stadium, or anywhere you can find him. So, and that's good. I think that's great to show. We talk about how this is still, in the grand scheme of things, a relatively young program that you're still trying to build some of these traditions going forward. So I think that the mascot and the identity around the program, that's a part of it. And I think that is going to continue to grow now in the future.
So, yeah, I just needed to put that out there because I knew Owlsley was a big deal, but I didn't realize how transcendent he was, and I felt completely insignificant in the whole thing. So back to the game.
Plus, for the bowl game, they make it such a big, family party atmosphere with the pregame carnival that's set up outside, which, is this even a bigger pregame scale than what we normally see at FAU Stadium? A lot of rides, a lot of, slides and things like that. They want kids out there. So that whole week, when you're trying to get a lot of families to come out to the game, that makes the mascot even more relevant, more of a hit, I think, because you're trying to get a lot of parents to come out and bring some young kids out there.
Yeah, no, it was, but again, because the skies opened up and it was pouring, I'm like, man, this seems like this is like a precursor to what the game is going to be. I just did not feel overly great about it. And part of the reason was, and I don't know if you guys consumed it the same way I did, but the game just felt like a complete afterthought compared to Lane leaving, Coach Taggart being hired, the Taggart press conference, the start of the Taggart era, Taggart meeting with the team, all of these things happening in between the Conference USA title game and the actual Boca Raton Bowl. And the game just felt like an afterthought. Like, here's this interim head coach with the staff that's remaining and the players that are remaining, getting ready for this game, but it almost seemed inconsequential. And so leading into game day, I was like, man, I hope that the team didn't consume it the same way I did, because I'm exhausted and there's still an entire game to play. I can't even imagine what it's like for the guys who actually have to play in the game.
Yeah, I think Mike mentioned it before, but the job that Glenn Spencer did of keeping everything in-house, I don't know.
Absolutely.
I've never seen anything like that.
Yeah.
But you mentioned it. Going into the game, I think the first thing I said when I got to the stadium was, "We're about to get blown out." Mm-hmm. I'll be honest. That's what if I had to bet. I'm not a betting guy, but if I had to put money on it, Harrison Bryant's out, D'Angelo Antoine is out, Kiki Leroy is out, Malcolm Davison is injured, James Charles. I mean, guys were just out. The leading receiver had more receptions in that game than he did throughout the entire year. like I'm looking at this game like, all right, we're done. I'm just here to enjoy, my dudes here. Mm-hmm. And they came out and curb stomp SMU.
And I mean, we're also in no position to ever take a bowl game for granted. And so, you go and you're going to do your job and you're going to hope the guys play hard. But I don't think any of us had a rosy predisposition about ourselves going into that game. And we had
that's the thing, is usually Ken is Mr. Negativity.
Yeah. Yeah, I
know.
So
when Bartels came to the booth, usually like we come in, and I think out of the three of us, Bartels is probably, the positive end of the spectrum. Ken is Mr. Negative when the day starts, and I'm somewhere in the middle between, depending on the week. And I lean a little bit more towards Bartels because usually from the night before and the morning of, he rubs off on me a little bit, gives me some of that FAU pixie dust. He thinks everything's going to turn out. When he showed up at the booth that day and he was worried, I'm like, uh-oh, because I went into it, you certainly had a different feeling going into this 2019 Boca Raton Bowl than we did a couple of years ago when it was celebrating the first year of Lane, the first bowl bids, since 2008, the fact that you were going to have it in your home stadium, which was something different, and the fact that they were playing a team that we knew they should just roll in Akron. That after other teams had ducked trying to avoid playing FAU at home. 2 years later, you're now back home again. You have all the uncertainty of how the team, like we've been talking about, is going to respond with Lane leaving and some of the other distractions. And then, you have an SMU team coming in that it's going to be a tough challenge no matter where you play them. And I think you also had a little bit more disappointment for fans and maybe even some people who were on the team that they were not traveling for the bowl game this year. Because you remember some of the bowl projections in the weeks prior had us maybe going to Dallas instead of SMU coming to Boca. And so you missed that trip. And I think actually a big thing that helped the team that week was the fact that they did have a little bit of a road trip by being designated as the North County team, going up to Jupiter, going up to Harborside, getting out of the element a little bit. I think that was a huge factor in order for them to say, hey, a lot of us are going to be in different places next year, whether players or coaches. Let's go out and have one more trip that we enjoy, one more big win, especially on this stage, and finish what we started. We talk right now in the quarantine about the NBA season trying to finish what they started, hockey. Hopefully we'll get football season started on time in the fall. But that team last year wanted to finish what they started, and they certainly did. But I think that it's a big factor that they did have a little bit of their own traveling party and road trip to get away from Boca a little bit to reset and get ready for that game.
Well, fans who are ever upset about us not traveling for a bowl game can lose me, but that's a different story for a different time. When it comes to the week leading up, and part of the reason that I was like, I don't know how this is going to go, is I was super sick in the week leading up to the game, like sick to a point that if I was sick like that now, I'd be in a car at a drive-up testing tent. Like it was
swab
bad.
up your nose.
Yeah, like it was. I tested negative for both flus. I tested negative for strep, but I was had a fever for like 7 days, could not kick it, and even the day of the game felt awful. But I'm trying to like trudge through the week to make sure that I can, I can be at events and be places and do my job. So the luncheon happened at Boca Resort, and this is the infamous James Proche situation that if you've seen the Willie Wright video on social media, him talking trash to James Proche as FAU is up $1 billion in the Boca Raton Bowl. So at the luncheon, they do a Q&A. And it's so the way the luncheon is set up at Boca Resort is SMU, their team is set up on one side of this massive ballroom. FAU is set up on the other side of this massive ballroom. And you have speakers come up. Santonio Holmes was the recipient of an award, and he gave a speech and was talking, and he gave some great stories and anecdotes about the Super Bowl. And then they did a Q&A with players. So it was the SMU quarterback, and it was Proche, the wide receiver. And then it was Robinson for FAU, and I believe it was John Mitchell. And like, if you guys have talked with John Mitchell, like he's the nicest, sweetest, least trash-talking human being on the planet. And so I don't even know why he was chosen to do the Q&A, but fine. Like, great. He'll be a great representative for FAU. So James Proche is asked, so who has the better offense, SMU or FAU? And Proche goes, answer me a question. Whose offense is ranked higher? And all the SMU teams stood up and just went crazy, just like hooting and hollering and going nuts. And Proche gets up and he like tells them to get up, and they're loud and all that stuff. So I can see Robinson's just sort of side-eyeing him, and like he's like, okay, yep. I look on the FAU side towards the players. Chris Tooley is sitting there stone-faced going like furious. Every member of the defense, like there was no smiley. No one thought it was a funny joke or anything. Like there was legit anger in that. And I'm like, this is interesting. So then Robinson got his guys going a little bit, but Proche, man, he was just talking. And that line, it definitely stuck with the guys. But I remember thinking, well, if FAU does win this game, I have a weird feeling that moment is going to come back. And sure enough, it did, because as FAU was celebrating on the sideline, and they could celebrate all fourth quarter, there were a lot of guys trash-talking James Proche. And don't forget it, this is a guy who just got drafted. This is a guy who came in first team American Conference. This is a guy who came in as a no doubt NFL prospect, and he ran his mouth, and he ended up regretting it after the fact. But it was just funny to see the reactions. Like there was genuine anger. I'll never forget that look on Chris Tooley's face. Like it was stone faced, it was head shaking, it was no reaction other than pure anger. And it was the second time that FAU has been in the Boca Bowl where someone has said something questionable. It was that associate AD with Akron in 2017 who said, we've come here to win. Next thing he knows, Lane Kiffin and Jason Driscoll are running up the score on him in the fourth quarter, going for 2 up like 40. And then this year, you've got FAU dropping 52 on an SMU team that was ranked in the top 15 like 5 weeks prior. The trash talking at the luncheon needs to stop. Like it just doesn't go well for the visiting team.
It's
No, let it keep going. Let them keep firing off, and then we'll shut them down and let the scoreboard do the talking on game day, man. You know, with you, Steve, Evan, the other team, you know, Doug Mosley, everybody involved with the Boca Raton Bowl, you should be submitting questions, Ken, to them to try to stoke the fire when we play next time.
I think it's one thing to trash talk in your locker room, but once you start putting that stuff out there, you start putting billboard material out there. I'm surprised. I'll tell you now, if that would have happened with Serge Sincere and the 2017, I talked to him today. It's just a different. He would have stood up, walked across the stage, and probably would have been in trouble.
Yeah.
I mean, but that goes to the discipline of FAU, and they know that between the lines, that's when it counts. And Chris Tooley locked him down. Prosch had a pretty good game. But up to the draft, just following Jake Elman a little bit on Twitter, and the amount of hate he got from SMU for saying that, you know, James Prosch is still on the board, hasn't been drafted yet. There was a mark out for Elman because of this receiver, but
yeah,
Willie Wright has all the reason to go ahead and talk. Scoreboard does all the talking for you.
I had a feeling that was going to live for a long time if FAU ended up winning, and it sure has. And I love it. I absolutely love it. And I mean, I get being confident, like James Prosch was. He should. That offense was awesome all year. But yeah, that ended up being a real tough thing to have to live with after the fact. And I just wonder, as they're flying back to Texas after being completely humiliated, if it crossed his mind that, oh, maybe I shouldn't have gone to that place during the Boca Bowl luncheon. And that was actually the day, and that was the luncheon where I first found out about all of the suspensions that were in play, or the decisions not to play, or the injuries. Like, I did not see D'Angelo Antoine. I did not see Kiki Leroy. I did not see Harrison Bryant. I didn't see any of those players. And I'm thinking to myself, this is a potential problem. And you just never know. You never know. I got fortunate 2 years ago. There's a lot of teams that get to bowl time because it's the start of a new semester, and all of a sudden you don't have your full complement of players because academics happen. In 2017, it wasn't an issue. In 2019, it definitely was an issue. And so, Mikey, I don't know if you remember, but I was sending, like, every 2 minutes as I found out more, group text to you guys. This guy not playing, this guy not playing, this guy not playing, and all of them starters, like pretty much all of them starters. And Bartels finally just said, like, enough. Like, I don't want to hear it anymore. Like, I mean, that was a pretty remarkable day, Mikey, because it certainly seemed like, you know, the team was going to show up. Someone was going to play in an FAU uniform, but it probably wasn't going to go particularly well.
Yeah, I mean, they were just dropping like flies. I mean, you know, again, Kenny has a tendency to, unfortunately, be the bearer of bad news. He often makes up in his own head because he's worried about the worst case scenarios. Usually it's Ken who's doing the smack talking that we are afraid of coming back to bite us later on when he starts engaging with the school down south and other places. And, you know, so I know that feeling. And that feeling that day coming into it, again, was not that good. But once kickoff happened, you know, it was only 7-0 after the first quarter, but you just had the feeling. You know, Emmons had the touchdown. The way SMU scored their first touchdown was after FAU had fumbled. Yeah. And then we took the lead back. Even when SMU got their second score, there wasn't a lot of time left in that second quarter, and FAU came right back. So once you saw the game and once you saw the way the team was on the field, I don't know if maybe SMU was taking things lightly, but certainly FAU, everyone who got their chance, and we had seen a lot of guys step up over the course of the season. I mean, you mentioned John Mitchell. How many guys were we talking about on the regular by November and December when we got to this bowl game that were just afterthoughts or at least question marks in August and September getting ready for the season?
Yeah. And I think, Bartels, you would agree with me that, like Mikey was saying, things look pretty even through one quarter of play, like so much so that between quarters, I told you guys, wow, this is not what I was expecting from either side. Like, FAU with a bunch of backups looked more competent than SMU did, and the defense was inspiring the entire day. Like that was the thing, is the defense really set the tempo. And then once Robinson got going, Robinson was unstoppable from about 2 minutes into the second quarter on. I mean, he was absolutely majestic, but the game was over as soon as the sequence that Mikey mentioned. SMU ties it up at 14 late in the second. FAU touchdown. Rashad Smith interception right into another FAU touchdown. The game was over after that. Like at halftime, you just felt like this could end up being a blowout.
Yeah, when you look at a team like SMU, who, if you look at their stats, they're one across the board. They're the highest scoring, highest yards, highest completion rating. Sam Buchel, Shane Buchel, great quarterback from Texas. And you're like, wow, man, what are we gonna do? And
I felt the same way.
You're like, all right, well, we know they're going to come out firing. We know what the bread and butter is. We got to lock down this receiver, and we got to defend the gap, in the run game. And they did that. And I think, like you said, Ken, you build some momentum off of that. You end the first quarter and say, all right, we took their hardest hit in that first quarter. This is our game to be won. Let's roll. And I think the coaches inspired the players. I think the players, and we talked about this before, the players took ownership of their team, flipped that switch, in the second quarter, and just took off.
It makes me wish that FAU of, mid-November could have gotten UCF, because I think that it would have been, one, a much different effort from FAU, and I think maybe a different result, period. I do think by the end of the season, FAU was a better team than UCF. FAU would have been right in the American championship race, in my opinion, the way FAU played from October 1 on.
Yeah, I would agree, Ken. I think, Mikey, you would somewhat agree, but you gain experience typically from game 1 to game 2. But when you open up at Ohio State, you know what I mean? It's a different, or Oklahoma, wherever you're playing. That's a big transition. It's not like you're opening up against Middle Tennessee, a conference game. You build momentum. You go into week number 2, and you have UCF coming into your backyard. And you're like, salivating at how well you did. You're still licking your wounds from the week before. But once you get rolling and you have your destiny in your hands, and you're just destroying people, you want UCF to come into your backyard. You want them at that point of the year. And it would have been a different story. We'll see what happens next year.
Yeah, and I hopefully there is a next year, and hopefully it starts relatively on time. But I have called a lot of games at FAU. I've seen a lot of FAU football, a lot of it bad. Fortunately, the last 3 years, a lot of it good and exciting and championship caliber. Not sure, though, if at any point in my 12 years at FAU, I have felt more proud about a group of guys, a collective effort, and overwhelming purpose of men than I did after the Boca Raton Bowl. It was so unexpected to me how dominant it was, and how exquisitely executed it was, and how perfect the game plan was, and how convincing the whole thing was. Like, we talk about adversity over all the time to the point where it gets cliche, but what FAU did against SMU was arguably one of the more shocking results in FAU football history, and it was to the tune of a blowout on national television. It was the most pride I've ever felt. This is after, 2 championships and a previous bowl win and almost knocking off Florida at the Swamp. Never felt more proud about an FAU football effort for an individual game. I mean, it was downright inspiring.
Yeah, agreed. I think as a former player, you wear those colors and that logo a little more proud, and like you said, national TV. A lot of people going into the game talking about, oh man, SMU, and seeing all the highlights on SportsCenter throughout the year. You're like, damn, we don't have Harrison Bryant, we don't have Kiki Leroy, we don't have Angelo Anson, we don't have our horses, our studs. How's this game plan going to work? And you have John Raines stepping up. You have defense and Rashad Smith putting the weight of the team on his shoulders, and carry him to the finish line. It's a story. It's almost like a 30 for 30. And Lane would always say that, make this be a 30 for 30 type of story. And that was the icing on the cake right there.
Mike, I do think that it was a little bit disrespectful that FAU didn't get into the top 25. Like, it's got to happen at some point if these winning ways continue. And I thought that FAU did more than enough, especially in the final month of the season, to get into that top 25. And I do get the sense, and maybe this is just me chip on shoulder, but I think FAU got jobbed.
Oh, without a doubt. And I don't say this because I'm wearing an FAU shirt and we work with the team and with the school. If you were just an observer of college football bowl season and you went into that game, even if it's played in Boca Raton, you go in and see a team that comes into that game at 10-3, matched up against another, successful program that, they didn't go in and beat some team that was barely bowl eligible. Like we talked about, SMU had been ranked in the top 15 during the season. They had 10 wins over the course of the year as well. This was a tough opponent, one of the other best group of 5 teams that you could get matched up with during bowl season. To be a touchdown underdog and go out there and steamroll them, I mean, if that doesn't get you enough credit to crack that top 25, that was definitely a slight. I was, after 2017, we were talking about it, all right, it would have been nice. Didn't happen. I expected it after that bowl game and was mad when it didn't happen. And I think that's going to add even some more. You talk about chips on his shoulder, Willie Taggart coming in saying he's got something to prove. I think some of the guys who hold over, while we want to start fresh in 2020, they'll still remember that. They'll still remember and have a chip on your shoulder if you're a Chris Robinson or if you're a B.J. Emmons maybe, or some of the guys who come back on defense, Kiki Leroy. I would definitely want to hold that over a little bit and say we are cracking the top 25 because we're 4-0 in bowl games. We've won a conference title. We've dominated on national TV at home. What are some of those other milestones you want to see this program try to achieve? Now, cracking the top 25 would certainly be one of them. Knocking off, one of these SEC teams or Power 5 conference opponents that we have scheduled in the next couple of years would be great as well. Now you add Missouri to the mix on that. So yeah, I mean, I would definitely carry that with me. If I'm Willie Taggart, I'd even be stoking that fire a little bit going into the falls because they absolutely, I think, got slighted to not even crack the top 25. That should have absolutely happened, especially after that performance in that game. And for the national pollsters, I guess they just said there's too many pieces that made FAU what it was to start 2019 are gone at the end of it. Maybe a lot of it was the Lane factor, and they slighted everybody else, and that was part of that validation and vindication for everyone from Glenn Spencer on down to the last guy on the roster, the red shirts and the walk-ons, to say that what we did here was started by Lane, for sure. He was a catalyst for it, but it was more than just about Lane Kiffin. I think that's a great thing for this program to take going forward, whether it's guys that are now playing in the NFL, and I think Rashad Smith got his Bears contract largely from the performance he had in that game that day, or the guys who are certainly going to be back with us in Boca coming up next year and beyond.
Well, Rashad Smith, it was clear he was never going to get enough respect as he deserved in the conversation for Conference USA Defensive Player of the Year, which he should have been very much more in the discussion. But he definitely put his stamp on the season and what I think was the best all-around performance from a defensive player in Conference USA in 2019. One quick story from the tunnel in that game. So before the game, obviously assistant coaches are walking in. I'm waiting for Glenn Spencer to get there so I can do my pregame interview with them. And the assistant coaches are very stone-faced. You can tell there's a lot weighing on them. There's a lot on their minds, as you'd imagine, knowing that they're basically free agents after the game. That's a pretty garbage feeling. And we do the interview. Glenn Spencer was relaxed. I mean, he's just a very even-keeled guy. After the game, I go into the coach's office, which is separate from the assistant coaches. And the coach's office is attached to a conference room. So I go in and sit down at the conference room table with Glenn Spencer. But in the coach's office, and there's like a foosball table in there, there's a snack bar in there, there's a stock fridge, they've got a huge flat screen TV. Like, that's Lane's office. That was Lane's office. It's now Glenn Spencer's office. But Glenn had let all of the assistants into that room. And it was funny seeing them walk around going, whoa, we never knew any of this stuff was here. This is crazy. You've got coaches like raiding the refrigerator, grabbing drinks out of there, grabbing bags of chips. Like it was like an amusement park to them. They'd never seen that before. They didn't even know that existed, that was the coach's office, that's where Lane spent his time on game days. And so Glenn Spencer just had everybody come in and raid the fridge and raid the snacks and play foosball and hang out after the game. And I thought that was extremely hilarious.
Yeah, that's my type of coach. You give me all access to a refrigerator and chips, you got my heart for a lifetime.
Let's go.
But that's the type of guy that I think Glenn Spencer is, and I wish FAU would have had more time with him. I know he's well respected around not just Boca and the state of Florida, but through the realm of college football. Former coaches that I had the pleasure of playing with know him and speak highly of him when his name gets brought up in conversation about him now being at USF. And I wish him nothing but the best and the job that he did. And Mikey, going back to your top 25, I agree. I think they deserve the top 25. But if you ask the players, would you rather have a bowl victory and the number of wins you had or be in the top 25? For as nice as it is to be in the top 25, these guys don't care about who's ranking them where. They just want to get out there and whip some tail. For as nice as it would be, that win was that much better. And I think, talking about tradition, Mikey, I think that next step for tradition is FAU being a 10-win program every year. That's their tradition. 2 out of the last 3, we'll take it. It's stepping stones. I think Taggart is going to build upon that. And like you said, stoking that fire with these players. What are these players doing now so that when the end of 2020 happens, football season or not, hopefully with football, have they been doing everything they've had to do to get into the top 25? If that is their dreams, if those are their aspirations as a program, who knows?
Yeah. The base has been set. That's abundantly obvious. And yeah, we all have a lot of respect for Glenn Spencer, just not in week 4 of the 2020 college football season. I'm all for Glenn Spencer. Hope he takes a big L that day in Boca Raton.
I'm sure he'll get a warm welcome when he comes back, for sure.
Oh, yeah.
We'll shake his hands if we see him, and I'm sure every Owl fan who sees him, even with the Bulls green on, will still give him and Charlie Weiss Jr. A nice little welcome back to Boca.
It's Charles.
Still ready to hand him an L.
That's right.
Those are some of our memories from the Cheribundi Boca Raton Bowl, and it was what did we do? We went to Hooters, right, after the game?
We went to Hooters after the game. Rashad Smith was there.
That's right.
Zion Gilbert was there.
That's right.
Who else was there? I feel like another player was there. And then Kevin Crossman was there.
That's right. So we partied a little bit, and then I had to hop on a plane really early the next morning and fly to Atlanta and drive to Mercer for an FAU basketball win. But those are some of our memories from the 2019 Cheribundi Boca Raton Bowl, and you can listen to the game in its entirety, how we called it, this coming Saturday, tomorrow actually, and that'll be at noon on Talk Sports 640, the FAU flagship. And so, guys, we'll do this again next week. What did I say the game was next Saturday? Let me
the Conference USA Championship against North Texas is the game slated for May 9th.
Gotcha. So Mason Fine, Seth Luttrell, and the boys coming into Boca Raton to take a second thrashing in 2017. That'll be the game next Saturday on Fox Sports 640. And so we will do this again for you, a little FAU football before the rewind. But again, before we go, congratulations to all the FAU players that signed an NFL contract this week. Congratulations, though bittersweet for Mark Knoll. It's all time, but we'll try and get him on this sooner rather than later. And boys, we'll do this again next week. Okay.
Absolutely.
Also, props to. Go ahead, Kris. I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to say, the guys that didn't get drafted, I know if you guys are very hopeful and you play all this time to get to a certain spot and get drafted. I think of a guy like Sherrod Niesman or Damian Parms who don't get drafted, you're sitting home, you're working in Publix, you're trying to figure out your part-time job, and an opportunity pops up. Don't lose that dream. If you're watching this, keep reaching. Who cares if you spend that money on some sketchy ass CFL workout? If it's an opportunity, go ahead and search it out.
Also, we got to give a little pop to Ken's road trip roommate, Frank Ford, who, along with some of the other staff at FAU, did a great job with the bracket they had at FAU Sports. And yes, we have our winner. We didn't have March Madness this year, but we still had a bracket at least. And did you guys agree that the Brandon Robinson third touchdown pull away in Ball State play of the year, it was voted by the Owl fans?
Yeah, with John Mitchell.
John Mitchell.
Mitchell, right? Yes, John Mitchell's third touchdown in Ball State. That's right.
Who knew he had it in him? That dude was like, he looked like Megatron out there.
That was one of the more unlikely performances I can remember. Him just coming out of nowhere at Ball State, but then he became part of what was a much more consistent receiving core than we ever thought they would be. I think they even surprised their coaching staff on multiple occasions throughout the course of the year. And so
I'm excited. He'll be back next year. We now got this transfer coming in from Arizona State. Let's go.
Yeah, no, it's definitely exciting. But 2017, that receiving core late in the year wasn't too shabby either. And North Texas found that out, a team that they saw earlier in the year with really no particular dangerous passing game, but still got throttled. Then came in with a complete FAU team in December and took it again. And so that'll be the game next week we talk about. It's the 2017 Conference USA Championship game, FAU and North Texas. That'll do it for us. For Kris Bartels, Mike Maresco, I'm Ken Levicka. Have a great weekend. Don't forget, Saturday at noon, 2019 Terrebonne Boca Raton Bowl, FAU and SMU, the full radio broadcast in its entirety. We'll talk to you then.